I'd like to thank you, Vikki Stark, so much for joining us today here on Prime Time Local News to talk about your book, Runaway Husbands.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So your book, what inspired you to write it?
So I'm a psychotherapist and a marriage counselor. And back in 2006, I had been in what I believe to be a very happy marriage for 21 years. And then one day my husband came home from work, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "It's over." And it came completely out of the blue. I didn't see it coming at all. We hadn't talked about having problems or needing to go for therapy or fighting unusually or whatever. And right then and there on that day, he sort of threw his stuff into garbage bags, threw it in the trunk of his car, and moved out and moved in with a girlfriend that I knew nothing about. So here I am. I'm a marriage counselor. If anyone should know what's going on, it should be me, but I didn't have any signs. And so I went through a very, very painful, traumatic period of time trying to understand, how does this happen? How does somebody morph overnight from a loving husband to, virtually an angry stranger? So as I started researching this and found that there was nothing written about it, I started a research study, and I heard from 400 women worldwide who had experienced this phenomenon, which I came to call wife abandonment syndrome. And from the data and talking with these women, it seemed to be a very, very clear pattern that men put into place when they leave suddenly from a marriage without having ever told the wife that they were unhappy or thinking of leaving. And so that led to my writing the book Runaway Husbands and developing the website runawayhusbands.com. And since then, since the book came out in 2010, I've developed this worldwide community of women who have experienced the same thing and who are struggling to recover, and who are helping each other through this whole process.
So what do you want the people who read your book to take away from it?
First of all, most of the women to whom this happens go into a very, very dark place. It's very, very traumatic. So like for myself, I lost 30 pounds. I was, really struggling to function. And I'm someone with a lot of support in my life. And so that the women to whom this happens are really, really struggling. They're having a very hard time. And so very often they feel like they're completely alone in the world, that nobody else has gone through this weird thing of a husband leaving out of the blue. And then the husband, meanwhile, is telling them things like, "I was never happy. It was never a good marriage. Remember that time we went to California on vacation and you thought we were having such a good time? Well, I was miserable." And the wife is like, "Oh my God, that doesn't make any sense. The things that he's saying don't make any sense." So they feel like they're, my perception of reality has been totally, tampered with. So they feel like they're crazy. So that when they locate our community, when they locate Runaway Husbands and they locate the website, they feel finally, I'm not alone and I'm not crazy. And so what I help them with is how to step by step recover and start to rebuild a new life as a single individual, in spite of the fact that many of the women in the Runaway Husbands community have been married for long periods of time. I mean, it's not unusual for someone to have been married 20, 30, or 40 years.
Thank you again so much for being here and talking about your book.
It was a pleasure. And once again, thank you for inviting me. And if anybody knows about someone who's struggling with this, just go to runawayhusbands.com and they'll be able to locate us.